This is the Wapak Area School District Board of Education meeting.
Okay, thank you everyone for adjusting your schedules this morning. We would like to give special thanks to Betty, who was 1 minute early this morning. We know that the morning meetings are your favorite.
Not good.
I would like to also thank everyone who was able to attend the commencement ceremonies. That all went, I think, relatively well from the input that I received from various individuals in attendance. And also, now that we have gotten past the school year itself, thank you to the board for all of your work and diligence throughout the year. Not that I should have to wait till the end of the school year to say that, but oftentimes I'm remiss in expressing my appreciation to everyone for all the work that they do on behalf of the school district. With that, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll ask Mr. Referrals to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think, Mr. Erzbaumer, at one point you said I hadn't called on you, and I think I've made up for it in the last roughly 6 months.
Yes, you did.
Okay, all right, very good. With that, I'll call this meeting to order. Roll call, let the record reflect that all members of the board are in attendance. That will move on to approval of the agenda. You have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Motion and second. Any discussion or questions? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next item on the agenda then, that has now been approved, is public comment. Do we have anyone that wishes to address the board? Yes, sir.
Two small things.
If you could identify yourself, please.
Oh, Andre Lachlitis. I got two small things I want to discuss here quick. So this is a copy of, for lack of a better term, our termination letter Carl sent us. Kind of impersonal, if you will. Give it that. Not one mention about how the district appreciates all our years of service that we did. Just kind of basically, you're done, contact right away. So with that, I'm asking that my name be removed from the plaque for 25 years to the district, since it didn't seem to be an issue to recognize it to all of the drivers. I just want my name removed from it.
Remove
From the plaque for 25 years of service. Might as well just not even have it on there if all our years don't matter. And another thing I'd like to ask Pat Fair, last month after you voted to have set right way, you said, told all of us drivers that work here we were getting better benefits that just the district couldn't afford to pay us. And you also told us that at our meeting the next day. That's good. I'm just wondering, you heard that from? I'm not finding that we're getting any better benefits, better wages, better anything. In fact, here's an example. We're going from 9 sick days to 0. 6 holiday pay to 4, that the new drivers have to earn 1 per year of service. Dental insurance, life insurance, health insurance is offered by the school, but not by right way. Much paid less on retirement. Our CDL is not paid, which it was by the school. For me, currently I get 2 1/4 hours on my morning and afternoon route. I will be getting 2 hours morning and afternoon as of now. It might change, but I haven't heard anything. Currently on my midday route, I'm trying to pick up for 4K. I get 2 hours. They only pay an hour. Trip pay, when I take extracurricular trips, I get $17.49 an hour. They pay $11 an hour. At that point, with the reduction in hours, I won't even achieve overtime. Very, very little overtime will I even get. financially, this translates into basically, these are approximate numbers, and I use my 2017 income. AM route, I'm losing $804 a year. Midday route, $2,518.56. PM route, $804. Holiday pay, I'm losing $332.31 a year. Trip pay will drop $1,550.38. Overtime pay will drop $2,252.42. And the retirement will drop approximately $991.83. And the sick pay reimbursement for over the 54 days, paid at $25 a day for the 9 days, would be an additional $225 I would lose. And also my accumulated sick hours, should I happen to get sick, at a value of $7,083.45, for a total of $16,551.95. And these are approximate, they're not exact. If you take the accumulated sick hours off, it's $9,468.50 that I'm losing every year because of this. Now, it may seem like, as Carl put it at our meeting in February, a woe is me attitude. Not so much. It's the reality of the numbers I figured out using my paycheck stubs. Excluding Mark Robinson, I don't think it would have been that hard for the board to do some additional research on this to see how it affected the drivers. It could have looked at what we all got and looked at what the vendors offered and did some figuring. Did you do your job? I don't think you did. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but it doesn't seem that you really did. It seems evident you voted on this strictly based upon what Carl wanted you to know. And again, if I'm wrong, I apologize. It just tells me that there was little research done and you weren't effective in this big major decision you all had to do. Sandy, you tell us, you told about back the paper where they know what you said, how important we are as ambassadors. I have a very hard time believing that at this point. You know, when we're losing that kind of income, you know, $9,000 for me is about a third, a little more than a third of my income. You know, that, we're going to get that. I mean, it's, you know, there's more drivers, I really think. Carl told the back paper that right ways wage structure is better than what the district pays. Not really. From what I'm finding out, it's exactly the same that they're honoring. There's nobody getting anything better. Where is this better that everyone said we're getting? All the good stuff. It's not happening. You know, no better benefits, no better wages. Even buses. Carl said we're going to be driving $150,000 to $200,000 buses, when in reality, Brightway told me that they buy international conventionals and they don't even have air brakes on. So much for the high-end buses. So, you know, I don't believe that the board is effective in this decision. So, you know, we've already lost close to 10 drivers because of this. You know, some retired, but I'm sure maybe they would have stayed. Some just walked off the job. So I'm asking the board, be part of the solution. Go down to Right Way and get an application and drive. Don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution. You know, do it for the kids. They need to get to school next year. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you. I hope you'll understand that we're not able to react because it's not on this
I agree.
agenda.
I agree. I just want to put this out there and let you know.
And if you would like to forward some of your numbers,
I can email all this.
I attempted to write this, but if you would like to forward some of your numbers, you most certainly, I would welcome that.
I just wanted to get this out, you know, right away after. So, all I gotta say, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
Good morning, President Johnson, board members.
My name is Tom Miller. I live in Parfreyville. I've heard my voice before this meeting before. We've had a lot of contentious times at this board this session over the fate of the district's top AP teacher. Many in this community no longer have faith in the direction of this board, the school board's personnel committee, the school board's administrator and principal at the high school. Much of the community's concerns pertain surrounding teachers, their retention, their recruitment, their respect, and the circumstances surrounding the early departure. You call it non-renewal and retirement. It was a firing of Joe Jansen by the school board. You forced him out early. There's no two ways about it, regardless of your press release you put out. The community knows much about what happened to Joe Jansen, more than you give it credit for. And we know it's not just been a 1 year on Joe. This administrator went after him last year too, and you allowed it to happen. So the personnel committee's busted. And there's no faith in the hiring, firing, recruitment, or retention of teachers in this once great district. Not by this administrator, not by this principal. You've done a great job in the past few months damaging this district's reputation, not just regionally, but statewide. Administrators statewide know about this place. Teachers statewide know about what's going on here. At the very least, this board owes this community a full and thorough public accounting on how teacher personnel matters are processed administratively from start to finish since Administrator Nian's tenure began. Big changes are expected by this community in the next few months, not a quiet time. Well, PACA's teachers deserve our respect, support, and the strong backing of the board, administrators, and principals on all things, small and large. And that hasn't been happening, obviously, by this administrator and principal, or we would have never been here on the Joe Jansen affair, ever. Because those were minor circumstances where, frankly, the teacher did his job, and these people came back and punished him after the fact. And neither of these gentlemen ever sat in his classroom to this day. So, that is my request to this board on behalf of the community. Go back and do a deep dive on what just happened, not over just the last few months, but the last 2 years. That's food for thought for today, and I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your service.
Thank you. Any other public comment? There being none, we'll move on in the agenda. Approval of the minutes. We'll start with the May 8th, 2018 regular board meeting.
So move for approval.
Motion to approve. And who was the second? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Second one. Any discussion, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The May 30th, 2018 special board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Finally, the June 1st, 2018 special board meeting.
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Moves us on to communications. We'll begin with the district administrator's report.
Good morning. There are a number of attachments that will be uploaded to the web regarding this month's district administrator's report. I will reference them within the report itself. I'd like to begin by outlining the district realized a 98% graduation rate for the class of 2018 as 172 of 175 graduated this year. 81% of our seniors participated in college level courses. 66% of our graduates earned college credits. The district realized the first 3 students in the state to earn their commercial driver's license through dual enrollment with Fox Valley Technical College. Another 9 students earned their Certified Nursing Assistant, or CNS or CNA, certification prior to graduation. Almost 40 seniors participated in youth apprenticeship programs, and nearly 50% of our graduates earned scholarships. The district was recently awarded $27,000 through a special education transition grant administered by the Department of Public Instruction to support the LIVE program and other special education needs in the district. Special thanks to Director Marcon and her team's work for that grant application. The School District of Waupaca continues its good work in the implementation of a multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS as we affectionately refer to it, as all 4 of our schools received recognition by the Department of Public Instruction through the Wisconsin Response to Intervention, or RTI Center, and the Wisconsin Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, or PBIS network. Chain of Lakes received the bronze level for behavior. Waupaca Middle School received the bronze level for reading and math. Waupaca High School received the bronze level for behavior, and Waupaca Learning Center received the gold level for behavior, reading, and mathematics. And I would just add a footnote that, as you might have heard me say at the end of the year address, they were one of 15 schools in the state to receive such an award. The attached DPI summary of 2017-18 enacted legislation outlines new requirements for public schools in Wisconsin. That is one of the attachments I referred to earlier. And then finally, during summer school of 2018, as part of the federal nutrition program, the district is offering free breakfast and lunch to all school district residents ages 18 and under. Students need not be enrolled in summer school to participate in the free breakfast and lunch program. That ends my report.
Thank you. Next item is board monitoring.
So this month we are on deck for school improvement plan results, and I'm going to turn it over to our principals at this time for their update. Who would like to, who's on deck to begin?
I'm on deck. 4K. We'll start with the youngest. So as you know, each school building, and 4K is considered a building, has an annual goal, an SLO, school learning outcome. And this year the teachers shared the building's SLO. 4K was following, you've heard at your March presentation, I think it was, about the pyramid model, social and emotional curriculum that we're starting, but we didn't have any baseline scores on that. We will next year, so next year that'll be our SLO. So this year we chose to combine with the elementary schools in a writing goal. And if you click on it, all of these links are embedded in your paperwork, so you can look at these graphs at your leisure, and I'll show you how to do the first one, and then after that we don't have to click on. If you go to page 4, you know that 4-year-olds come in maybe not even being able to hold a pencil, so they are scored on their name writing by the end of the year, or up a little more, it must be page 3. Just wanted to show you the dramatic results. So our goal was that the students would get to that shaded area on the PALS rubric. The PALS rubric is a detailed list of just the continuum going from scribbling of making marks to letters to their actual name. And so you can see how the students came out from fall to spring and learning to write their name. It's a dramatic improvement. So we celebrate that. Name writing is the very first step in learning to write. So the 4K schools did meet their goal this year. Next school would be, is it Chain or is it the AGR? It's the AGR. So you might remember in the mid-year, I presented an AGR report to you. AGR is the Achievement Gap Reduction. It used to be called SAGE. So we report to the state on how that class size of 18 to 1 helped, and we measure the growth of every single student. So on some of these reports, you'll hear us, how many of our students met a certain benchmark. But on AGR, what we really measure is their individual growth. It's really based on individual growth. So we follow each child, and every grade level, kindergarten, first, second, and third, has a reading goal and a math goal, and how much the children will grow. And so when you have time, click on those links. It's very detailed. Kindergarten has a goal for ABC recognition, for reading, and then for numeracy, they have another one, and so on, all the way through 3rd grade, and both Chain and WLC met their growth areas in all of those categories. And then we have Chain, and we did the Lucy Calkins as a goal. So next slide, please. Wendy reported to you, I think it was last month, about the new writing program. Lucy Calkins is very well researched, and it is designed that the students will learn the most when they have it every year and follow the same vocabulary every year. So this is our first year. So we followed what Lucy suggests as 0.5 of a growth on her rubric. It comes with a rubric. Now when the teachers score this, they have norming meetings every time they score. So they sit down with the rubrics and samples of the students' writing and make sure that everyone's scoring the same way. And so each time they do a pre and a post, they do those norming meetings. And that's how these scores are determined. So we wanted all the students to get at least a 0.5 of a growth. Good news was by mid-year they had done that. And so I think all of our buildings upped our end of the year goals. And in a little different way, at Chain I outlined that 80% of the students would reach a 3, which is proficient on a 4-point rubric. We didn't quite meet that. That was really a lofty goal. I think we had 67% meet that 0.3, but we did have all of the students already by fall almost meet the 0.5. So really good writing scores and really good growth in writing. So Chain met their goals, and W4K, and I'll let you go to WLC.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So at the Wapaka Learning Center, as Rhonda said, we did the Lucy Calkins unit of writing study as well in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd. And the reason that we chose those 3 grade levels is because those were the grade levels that were given the coaches for the year. So in our writing SLO, and again, you can look all this up, all the numbers are online, we wanted 90% of our kids to grow 0.5 in that rubric throughout the year. And in our winter testing, we already met that goal at 90% of our K1-2 students. So we upped it to 95%, just pushed it a little bit. Instead of exhaling, we thought, well, let's just see how far we could get with the kids. They're doing really well. So we ended up with 92% of the students at the WLC and K1-2 that met that 0.5 or higher goal. And when you go into the SLO rubric, you'll see the scores, how many kids improved. It was on a very high level, the kids that went from being non-proficient to proficient. So we started with, I believe, 7% kids proficient at the WLC. We ended with 74% of our K1-2 kids at that proficient level in the first year, which is higher than what Lucy said the kids should be. So as Rhonda stated, we've met our goal in all our buildings with the Lucy Calkins. If you go into the next slide, Dr. Meehan.
John, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you talk about a 0.5, and I know Rhonda did too, a 0.5, or any kind of an increase in scoring, in a practical sense, and I know we can look into all the numbers, but in terms of the writing, does that mean then that the student maybe knows like how to put a paragraph together or how to make a complete sentence? I mean, is that the sort of thing we're talking about here?
Yes, and the rubric has all different areas to it. Conventions are part of it, but can they put more than one sentence together? Can they write a story with more than one page? They look at the meat of the story. Can they get details in the story? And as you go from kindergarten up through 4th grade at the elementary school, you'll see that they start with drawing pictures. So the students will come up with a topic during their mini lesson after the teacher's instruction, and then they have to draw what they want to say, and then they write the story based on what they see. And so the drawing of the pictures leaves when you get to 3rd grade and 4th grade, but what we really have witnessed was the stamina of students writing. So they're writing more independently now than they ever have. So that's the one thing I've noticed as principal is the stamina where kids can sit down and write for a half hour, 40 minutes at the 3rd and 4th grade level uninterrupted, which is, I think, really good. But the rubric has all different areas of writing in it, and they grade each one based on that rubric.
Okay, thanks.
So I wanted to go over this slide real quick because in 3rd and 4th grade, we did not do writing. We did math, and we did math with our students with disability and our students who are economically disadvantaged. We wanted to compare our students with their peers around the country that actually use the STAR assessment program that we used this year. But this screen I wanted to put up here because it took me a while to understand it as well. So we compared SGPs, which is a standard growth percentile. What that measures is it compares a student's growth to that of his or her academic peers nationwide. These peers are students in the same grade with a similar achievement history on the STAR assessment. The lower number indicates lower relative growth through the year, and the higher numbers indicate a higher relative growth. So when we looked at this, and you can go to the next slide. So I am going to ask you, Dr. Nia, to just click on that one real quick, because without seeing the numbers, it's really difficult. On the math SLO, we'll take the economically disadvantaged students. There's a background. 9 out of 80 students met the fall STAR forward cut scores in the fall, 16 of them in the winter, and 28 students in the spring. And what our goal was, by spring of 2018, we wanted 80% of those 80 students to attain a 50 SGP or higher. And if you scroll down just a little bit. So the end of the year results, we had 45, which was 61% of the 74 students, and the reason it went from 80 to 74 is we have move-ins and move-outs. Attained the goal of 50 student growth percentile or higher. The average of those 45 students was a 62. So that means that the average is 62% of our kids that scored above, they would have beat 62% of their peers from the fall. So from the fall to the spring, our kids would have outperformed their peers, 62% of them on that same test. But there were 29 students who did not attain that goal of 50. They were below the 50, and their average score was 18. So from this data, we know that we have some work to do with our economically disadvantaged students. And then right below that line, it's the students who are not economically disadvantaged. One of the things we want to see is, are we closing the gap? Economically disadvantaged students, are they catching the non-economic disadvantaged students? So you'll see 102 students in 3rd and 4th grade met that 50 or above, and they averaged 75%. So what that means is if you look at 62% up above to 75, there's a gap there. So our non-economically disadvantaged students are performing at a higher level than our economically disadvantaged students. So it's an area that we are going to have to look at, is how do we address that to close that gap. And I want to talk a little bit about the disabilities one. It's on the previous page, if you scroll up a page or two. The disability one, our students with disabilities performed very well. If you look at the end of the year results, 31 of our 46 students with disabilities attained that 50 or higher, and their average score was a 73. That's a job well done by students and staff. Of the 15 students who did not go above 50, the average was 21. If you look down below, 112 students without disabilities scored above the 50th student growth percentile, and their average was 75. So although it's only a 2% difference on the average, that gap still increased a little bit, even with our students with disability. So it's another area that we have to look at when we look at how are we instructing, what instruction are we giving it to, who are we giving it to. And it's one of the things, going back to assessment, which I know we're going to be looking at a great deal next year, is how can we use assessment to put instructional goals in place for each individual student to help them grow the most. So that's one of the things that we're going to be doing with our PLC time next year with that.
John, when you talk about economically disadvantaged, is that the same criteria that we use for free and reduced lunch?
Yes. It's the
Is
students
that-
who
is
are
that-
on free and reduced.
Is the free and reduced lunch criteria, from your perspective now, this is just kind of off the cuff, I guess, putting you on the spot, is that realistic? Are we still dealing with, are those numbers and how we determine people, is that pretty much realistic, or is that just a formula that's been around forever? And
It's a formula by either the federal or state government, I'm not even sure. But the numbers come out through our food service department.
Right.
So they're the ones who are determined, and the paperwork is filled out. So they let us know how many students at each grade level are economically disadvantaged. And then we have access to that as principals to pull out, to separate, so we can actually see the gap or lack of gap in those areas.
So anyone who qualifies for free or reduced lunch is considered to be in this economically challenged?
Correct.
Well, that leads me to another question. How many students do you believe that are economically disadvantaged that we're not targeting?
Well,
I know that's a hard thing to do because a lot of that information is private to the families, and unless they come forward, we can't know that piece of information.
So I do believe there are more than what we have on record, but for whatever reason, their personal reasons, family reasons, that people do not fill out those forms to be identified on that list. And it's private. The only people who see it are the principals and the food service person, which would be Dar. But there are people who do not fill out that form. So there are more in our school than what we have listed.
Is there any way we can do a little interpolation from data from another source, county data or state data, to know how many more students we're not reaching?
Research would suggest that it can vary by up to 17%. So
Up
you
to
could have
17%.
17% more of a economically disadvantaged. And I think what John and Mark and next year Jenny could attest to is that what we see the decline in free and reduced status happening from elementary to senior high. So as the students themselves become more aware of the subgroup that they've been placed in, the more hesitancy there is in the home dialogue to complete that paperwork and pursue that status, even though it can be a significant benefit to the family. It's the stigma that makes that difference.
Just a sobering anecdote, maybe some of you saw in the paper, the report, excuse me, that Wisconsin came out with, the number of students or young people who are on below the poverty level has increased in the state, even though the jobs have gone up, which is kind of sobering. It went from 10.8 up to 12.1 or something of that nature. So the reality is we might be facing more students, not fewer, in the future.
And I think we're hovering around 40% at the Learning Center. And again, these are just third and fourth grade students that we're looking at. We have work to do, we know, in closing the gap with students with disabilities and economically disadvantaged students, and it will be an area that we focus on. But a sidebar that came from all this, if you look at the last line there, 140 students did not attain the goal of 50 student growth percentile or higher, and their average was 24. In that group of 140 are students such as our top-notch students, our 99th percentile. So they started out in the 99th percentile. At the end of the year, they may have ended in the 99th percentile or 98th percentile. But when you look at the SGP, if they're below that 50, that means our top students from fall to spring did not grow as far as other students in that same category. Not all of them, but it was an area that popped up to me that said, no, we need to look at not just those two subgroups, but the top students to see, are they performing and outperforming their peers with similar assessments in the fall? And it's another area I think that we'll take a look at as we move forward. So, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. I think getting back, Mark, to your question is, I'm not sure that there would be data that we could attempt to obtain, and if we did, it could well start breaching on that confidentiality and personal information that some, as has been pointed out, may choose not to be bringing forward. So I appreciate where you're coming from. I'm just not sure how we would get there without invading some privacies.
But one more question maybe before we leave this. So in a typical classroom, and maybe John or whoever, you've got 25 students, 20 students, whatever the case, and you do a series of tests, right? And all of the students are basically given the same lead up to the test and the same directions and the same prep time and whatnot. And then do you look at the scores after the fact to see which of those economically disadvantaged fall into this category and those which don't here? Or do you try to earmark certain students ahead of time and try to present things a little differently?
No, we don't earmark the students ahead of time. When we do our assessments, it's every classroom, every student, every classroom takes the same assessment, same instruction. When the results come in, I can look at it at grade level, or I can look at it at individual classrooms, and then I can get the report that will tell me who those students are.
Right.
And then I can separate them out on that report and then do a study to see how far are they growing compared to how far are the kids who aren't in that group growing. And that's what we did in this study.
So that begs the question then, how do you try to, if you've got a group over here that's lagging behind and you know that because you've seen the results, how do you maybe gear the material so that they can achieve better without,
Yes, the classroom teachers will not know who the students are. They're not
Yeah.
given that information.
Right.
So it's our job to come up with instructional goals within a grade level at a certain topic such as math, to say, okay, how are we teaching math? And if we're not reaching a certain group of kids, how can we reteach that? Can we take the formative assessments inside of a classroom and work with a group of students? Because there may be certain areas of math, like algebraic thinking, that a student is low in, but is high in everything else.
Right.
So they have to look at the individual student, no matter who they are, to differentiate their instruction to meet those needs. And that's one of the goals that we're gonna shoot for.
And that's one of the really great things about the new iReady test that we're gonna be doing, is after the students take the test, it will give us all the data and show all the points that the students need to work on in the future. So it differentiates that, and then it gives you additional instruction and ways to inform the students so they can move forward and improve in those areas that they're lacking.
And if I could just add to, I don't think anybody's saying this, but just because you're economically disadvantaged doesn't mean you're not going to score as well. We have plenty of
I'm not trying to
kids
imply that.
scoring the top percent as well.
right, and I'm sure the opposite is true as well.
Absolutely, and so I think what John just described very well was this idea that use the data to take a look at who's performing well, who's not performing well. Just when we dig into these reports later on,
Yeah.
that would be identification of, what are some of those subgroups that could come up, that could show up on a school report card from a state perspective anyway, so that we can try to get ahead of the curve to say, what are our realignments of resources to better support different subgroups of students.
And
Well,
when
no-
you work on learning targets, you're getting a mix of where the students
Right.
came from, the
Right.
background, if you're really working on intervention on that learning target, not this group of students.
Well, from a board's point of view, I mean, what we can do, or what can we do to help alleviate, or to make the scores better and to alleviate the number of students that we have that may fall into that category is a bit minimal. But as you heard earlier, having free and reduced lunch, or a free lunch for the summer school, that's a good thing. I mean, from our perspective, at least helping a little bit. But there isn't a whole lot we can do other than to know what the numbers are and address them as best we can.
What it really comes down to is their early childhood experience.
Yeah.
All things being equal, once they enter our facilities, an affluent child, a child that's brought up in an affluent family, will be exposed to 3 million words by the time they're 3 years old. Whereas a child from an economically disadvantaged family or environment is only exposed to 1 million words. And that's a significant difference. And so it's that enriched environment and that exposure to language from very early on that's really the difference maker. That's why early intervention and special education and title programs are so valuable to public ed.
I'm not going to try to parse the data too far, but do you also, you said this is compared on a countrywide basis. Do we also have it on a statewide basis, realizing that there could be some level of geographic difference as well in both the socioeconomic atmosphere as well as potentially other learning or various learning attributes?
I think if you take the forward exam, that is our state exam, we can break that out with the information. The STAR, it's only comparing students around the nation with the schools and grade levels that are testing the STAR. For example, Winner County and other school districts are using iReady right now. When we moved iReady, our norming group will be that. Because I believe there was over 5 million students normed in the STAR a few years ago. So those are the 5 million that our kids are in that bank and are compared to. But only the kids that in the districts that use this test.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So, similar to what the WLC and the chain did, is we took those Lucy Calkins rubric, but only for our 5th and 6th grade, because Tricia Nebula, our coach, coached very heavily at the 5th and 6th grade level to focus on them. So that's where we extracted our ELA data. Next year, we will do our writing, or our SLO on the whole school with writing. But this year we did exactly what the WLC did by taking 2 grades for the writing and 2 grades for the math. So if you go to the next slide, I can show you what our data showed. I know this is pretty word heavy, but I'll break it down for you. So We also had a 90% goal of a 0.5 growth, and we actually reached that goal. If you look on the right-hand mid-year table, we had 91% of our students that met the 0.5 growth at the mid-year. So instead of growing to 95%, we decided, hey, let's see if we can get 80% of our students to reach a point, or a 1 growth, a whole number growth. So then if you look at that right side graph, or table, it actually shows that we only had 52% of our students meet that one point growth, but we had 88% of our students at the end meet that 0.5 growth. And the reason why that number went from 91 to 88 is because our mid-year data, we did not have all of our 282 student numbers in yet. We only had 237. So once we got all of the numbers in at the end of the year, we were right under that 90% threshold for our growth at 0.5. So when you look at the Peach 102, those are that's the number of students that reach that 0.5 growth, and we had 103 students in 5th and 6th grade meet that 1 growth. And then you can see 40 and 2 and 1 go even higher. And then the left side tables, that just breaks it down at the level of proficiency within our students. The level of proficiency is rated at a 3, 3.5, and 4. So you can see where we're sitting there for our 5th and 6th grade students. Okay? And then for our 7th and 8th graders, we did a math goal as well. And we also extracted the data for our economically disadvantaged and our students with disabilities. So if you go to the next slide, I can show you what our end result was. When you look at all of our students in those 2 subgroups, instead of looking at the SPG, right? Okay. We were trying to close the gap by having them meet their goal plus an additional 10%. So when you look at our 96 students that were both economically disadvantaged and students with special needs, we had 48% of those students that met their goal plus a 10% to close the gap. But we did have 78 out of 96, 81% of our students meet their actual goal that was given to them. And then the 2 bottom rows extract the data for specifically special needs and for economically disadvantaged. And you can see that it was almost exactly the same for both subgroups going across the board. And then the reason why the numbers don't totally add up is because there were some students that were listed under both special needs and economically disadvantaged. Thank you, John, for doing all the heavy lifting the first time.
So let me ask you this question, and just off the top. So you have these numbers, and you have the percentages, and you have the growth. You are dealing with students who, at the 8th grade level, will be transitioning to the high school at the next year. Do you see them being high school ready then as they come out of the 8th grade? How does that fit into? So you get 90% growth, whatever. So they come in as freshmen. So what does that mean to the freshman teacher?
Well, we sat down with actually the new high school principal already and went over all the data, went over all these students that are sitting in some of these areas that need additional assistance, and our data team met and our 8th grade teachers met, and we've already put them into the proper classes that will meet their needs so that they can close that achievement gap.
It's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
an opportunity for alignment of resources. I think one of the things out of next year's early release Wednesdays is we'll be looking forward to some, we had one meeting this year with the high school staff and the 8th grade teachers to talk about what is that continuity between buildings, and we're going to continue with those types of conversations, absolutely.
Well, it'd be the same conversation we would have as seniors in high school. Are they career ready? Are they, life ready? The same thing. You get all this data and numbers, but in reality, how does that translate into being ready for the next step? So.
And our teachers are always pushing for that and having that open dialogue with the students, making sure that they feel ready for that next step.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And just one thing I want to add in, just to keep in mind, is that this is a fall and a spring shot. They take it and they're done. There's a lot of variables that go into these scores. There's a lot of times the students will come back with their individual results, and the teachers will be going, I can't believe it. They know way more than this. Well, it might have been a bad morning, it might have been a bad night. I'm not, there are variables that go into the results. So even though we get a lot of good information from this, there's a lot more that's happening in the room instruction-wise that we can pinpoint, and the teachers are doing that on a daily basis with their instruction.
Yeah.
So at the high school, we take a little bit of a different approach in terms of, we had 4 SMART goals, and I'll get to the building wide hustle over here in a minute, but you can see the 4 SMART goals here in front of you. And then the next slides kind of break down how did we do in achieving each one of those SMART goals during the 17-18 school year. So the first goal is really about kind of what you were talking about, Mr. Fair, in terms of are the students ready for that next level? And if you're at graduation, you kind of saw how many of our students took advantage of opportunities. Some of them are listed here, but not all of them are listed here. You know, really it's about the number of students participating in college type or college level or youth apprenticeship, youth options, opportunities. The CAP courses with UW Oshkosh, of course, AP stuff, advanced standing stuff, Fox Valley Technical College, a couple of transcripted classes there. And so we're really looking at how many of our students are taking advantage of rigorous opportunities within our 4 comfortable walls, because once they leave Whitpack High School, we know some of the supports just aren't there for them, or life changes and so forth. And so last 2 years we started to track this information and data, and you can see the class of 2017 was a pretty special class, pretty high numbers there, so we didn't reach our goal there in terms of that, but I would still say that, you know, 8 out of 10 of your students having participated in the college level course will still here at high school is a pretty good number, and you know, 6.5 out of 10 of them leaving here with some kind of college credit is again a really strong number, especially for a community of our size. And when you take a look at all the resources and opportunities and options we have for students, I think what we're beginning to see is a little bit of competition, right? I mean, you have so many things and you only have an 8-period day, and a kid wants to take this 2-period class because they're really interested in this, but yet they want to take this Singleton AP biology class, but there's only one section of it, and they're also a musical student, and yet they have this new programming class that came on board. And so, you know, you got 8 periods in a day, and you got to try to resolve as many conflicts as possible. And so it's a great opportunity, and it's a great advantage our students have. They have so many opportunities, but also it can cause some heartbreak for some kids when they can't get into all the classes that they want. And so, you know, I think it's a great opportunity to be a comprehensive high school, and try to fulfill as many niches and needs and opportunities as we have. It is an exciting thing. So we're going to continue to track that and take a look at that, and hopefully those numbers will continue to grow. 87% attendance rate is kind of that rate that the state sets in terms of, are you considered a truant or are you not considered a truant? Of course, we know if you're at school, you're going to get a better education than if you're not at school. And so that's where we take a look at how many of our students are attending at an 87% rate or better. This chart is a little bit more than just looking at that 87% rate, because it's important to note that typically as students get older, their attendance decreases. And I'm sure if we continued back to when they were in, you know, 1st grade, 3rd grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, and so forth, you'd see some of that same trends. And so really when we start looking at the reasons why, some of it could be socioeconomic, some of it could be engagement, some of it could be life and changes. You know, we have a lot of students and families that go through changes in the course of the 12-year period, especially in a 4-year period here at the high school, and becoming their own too. And so this year we did increase overall the number of students that are attending at 87% or better by 1.4% there at the bottom, kind of in the middle there, compared to 16, 17. And again, important data to keep an eye on, because obviously if they're not here, it's harder for us to educate them. Although again, I would also argue sometimes there's a lot more opportunities. And so we try to adjust kids' schedules as best possible for their needs and their life situations, but sometimes that in and of itself still isn't a big enough hook to continue to engage them. And some of our kids are just unfortunately having to work and do some other things, make some other tough choices where education almost takes a backseat. But we're working on those things.
Mark, can I just ask a question about the numbers on that? Can you just go back? I'm just looking at the numbers of the classes in terms of class size.
Yeah.
And obviously next year's seniors will be considerably smaller number, 158, is that correct?
Right.
So, and I don't know if that'll make any difference overall with your percentages and things, you know, it's hard to tell.
Well, that's why I put the numbers and percents there, so you can kind of track that, because, you know, if you have a smaller class, you might have a little more personal connections with some of them, sure.
You kind of hope that that's the case.
Correct, but overall, the number of students is off by 5, give or take, between the 2 years. You know, when you take a look at all 4 classes together, because, you know, one class might be larger, as you can see the class of 2020 is significantly larger than, you know, the class of 2019, for example.
Do we know, I'm sure we do, what the number of the incoming freshmen is for next year?
Yeah, so that's that class of 2021 there.
Oh, 165. Right. Gotcha, okay. So, again, considerably smaller than this
I'm
year's
sorry,
graduate.
let me take that back, that's the freshman class. I could look that up and then make it back to you in a minute.
Well, that's okay, I just was curious if it falls.
For Laura, do you know what?
So let me go through these. We're at like 170 for the upcoming sixth grade, 137, I think, for the upcoming seventh grade, 140 something, and I think it's 160 something for the incoming freshmen.
So pretty similar to the class that we have right now.
Mhm.
Okay. So obviously, the larger classes, the seniors that are just moved on, and the sophomores are the two large groups, everybody else about the same. Yeah, okay.
So, negative office referrals, of course, looking at behavior and are the behavior things that we're doing in terms of PBIS that will pack away impacting student achievement. And so the one of the ways we measure that is just by the number of students receiving office referrals. And so we looked at, and of course there's major and there's minor and there's positive as well. We just looked at it through the lens of those students who are receiving negative office referrals and have we decreased that by 3%, which would be an indication that the systems and practices that we're putting in place are working. You can see overall there from 2017 to 2016, we were at 20.5% of our population of students were receiving referrals. To this year, we got it down to 18.4%. So just over 2% reduction there in that number. And you can kind of see the number of students there, and there's no surprise again when you look at students in terms of, you know, as they mature and as they understand school and as they're with us, their patterns of behavior tend to improve. I mean, as parents, you kind of think those things too, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a village to raise a child as well. And again, sometimes the things that are the behaviors that they're bringing in are just symptoms of what else is going on outside of their life. And so again, that's for us from an administrative standpoint to look at what education, what kind of communication supports can we provide our staff as well to better understand those and meet those student needs. And then our last part was really our building-wide SLO, was really to increase our students' ability at reading complex tasks as defined by the ACT and also the ACT Aspire. So unfortunately, we didn't have the test results back yet from the 9th and 10th graders on the ACT Aspire. However, we just recently received the ACT results. And so when you break it down and you look at how they do in terms of increasing the percentage of students scoring advanced and or proficient and understanding complex text as measured by the ACT, you can see we did a 10% increase in the number of students there, and that's that last line from 17-18. So if you just look at below proficient, we decreased from 70% of our kids scoring below proficient to 60% of our kids scoring below proficient. Where did that 10% go? That 10% went into that proficient category, so we raised that from 15% to 25%. And the number or percentage of students that stayed above proficient remained the same at 15%. The state data is there, you always have a good comparative as well. So, you know, in the above proficient, you can see the state went from a 17 to a 14, what we maintained, which was a good sign. And the percentage of students that went in the proficient category in the state increased by 7%, and we outpaced that by increasing by 10%. So those are pretty positive signs. And so this is where our professional development opportunities and focuses came through with bringing in K Unite, with asking staff, hey, just let's get all on the same track and provide our students with more complex reading tasks from course to course, where it increase the percentage of time that they're reading, expand the vocabularies that they're exposed to, so that when it comes to these sort of standardized assessments that are important to our students, they're going to have a better shot at it. And that concludes our side of things.
So certainly a lot of information for the board, recognize that, but it does cover all three of the ENDS policies: student achievement, responsibility, and citizenship. So certainly if the board has questions, our principals are always available to respond.
Okay. A lot to digest there. Moving on, we'll go to the school board section item, excuse me, section item 8. Meetings attended, any outside meetings attended by members of the school board that they would like to report on today?
Is the school visits too?
No, it's not on the agenda, I don't know.
School visits isn't on there. But I did.
Sort of.
Okay, well, we'll just include that right in with reports then.
Okay. We had May assignments. So mine was to go to the alternative learning school. So I spent some time there. Unfortunately, Mr. Peters wasn't there, but I spent a lot of time with Nancy Bloomberg, who was awesome and really spent time talking about the young people there. And then I was able to talk to several of the students who were there that afternoon. And some were graduating and they were pleased with their progress, others freshmen, sophomores, that we're so grateful for that program. And every year when I visit them, I'm always amazed. It's always my May visit when I come out. That, we have a program in place for kids that need to approach education a little differently. And I think it's really successful, and I think it's an awesome opportunity for those young people. And they're very proud of what they accomplish and how they accomplish it. And I know it takes a lot of work from our teachers in that area and support staff, and they do a great job.
I also did some visiting, actually, both outdoor visits. I visited Mr. Rupplinger's contest with the solar-powered cars out on the tennis courts. And it was actually very interesting. I'd never seen that before. And they raced each other. And kind of double duty, because part of the reason I wanted to see that was the materials that they used to make those cars, which have little solar panels on them, is through a grant through Rotary. And so I thought I just followed up to see where and how that was being done. So that was very interesting. Like I said, I'd never seen it before anyway, so I was amazed how fast those cars could go. And the other thing I did, I went to the 4th grade track meet. Spent the morning shooting the gun on school property with Linda Cassera at the start, and spent the morning right out here at the new, and everybody was real excited because it was at the new facility. Happened to be a very hot morning when we were there. The sun was beating down and there was no wind, so it was a little warm for everybody, but it was great, and we had a really nice time. I'm always amazed at how organized they are with all of the kids and how many participate and all that kind of good stuff. So it was great. Had a lot of fun.
Very good. Anything else under the board section?
I did come to school one day when it was Bring Your Tractor to School Day, and I tried to find Greg to see which one of his tractors was out there, but he was gone.
Yeah,
They were all lined up out there.
Yeah, they always are.
Awesome.
I figured he would have been here for sure.
Is there Bring Your Snowmobile Day in the winter?
You should see some of
the
the rigs that they bring out there.
Do kids come in snowmobiles in winter ever?
Rarely.
Yes,
Rarely.
they do. Yeah, or April.
Okay, we'll move to upcoming meetings.
June 26th is a finance committee meeting, and July 10th is the regularly scheduled board meeting, again at 7 a.m. in this room.
What time is the finance committee meeting? It's not on here.
I believe it's 3:30?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock, my mistake.
And I won't be here for that.
Pardon me?
I won't be here for that.
And the administrator, section C.
So the first item is an activity account request. Board policy requires that any student activity accounts are approved by the board. This is a recommendation via policy and best practice in audit. We're looking for approval to create the Rotary sponsored Interact Club, and the information is included and attached to the memo.
Do we need a motion here?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I would make a motion, but before I make my motion, I just want to make a comment. As a member of Rotary, that's kind of an aside. The Interact Club is basically high school age students who take a great interest in some of the concepts of primarily international concerns, as well as local community service things. But we have a very active group, as I think you know, of foreign exchange students have had for a long time, both coming and going in this district. And a lot of the students who are part of the exchanges will be certainly a big part of the Interact Club. I mean, they come back and then there's really nothing for them here in high school, so they'll have an opportunity, many of them, to get involved. And that's one of the things that have pushed this group together. And also we have a very active Japanese exchange at the middle school, and then some of those students will also certainly be a part of it. So I'd make a motion that we adopt the Rotary Interact Club as presented.
Second.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, item 2.
I would ask Laura if you're...
So we have, we're getting rid of German in the 7th grade level next year. And that leaves our 7th grade Spanish classes at a very high number. We're looking at 36 students. So we're requesting a .2 FTE, it says 33 here, sorry. A .2 FTE to help teach those 2 7th grade Spanish sections. It did say Paula Reesop on the agenda. Paula let me know at the end of last week that the .2 payment is not going to be enough for her to do it for the entire school year. So if this gets approved today, we'd like to be able to open it up on weekend to see if we can find a .2 FTE for our 7th grade Spanish classes to decrease the class sizes to a more manageable level at that intro level Spanish.
Okay, any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion?
So you're saying then that we don't have a person in place at the moment?
So this is in addition to what we have?
So, yes, as you know, Chelsea Gable, who teaches German, is only going to be teaching at the 8th grade level now.
Right.
And what we've always done is we've always had 2 or an additional some sort of teacher at the 7th grade level. And because we haven't figured out what language we want to introduce yet at the middle school level, we are at very high numbers at the 7th grade level just for 1 teacher.
So who is teaching Spanish now?
Mandy Salter.
Oh, okay.
And Paula Reesop has been
She was
for
the
many
teacher.
years, yeah. But just at that .2, it's not enough for her right now.
And Chelsea's not certified to teach Spanish?
Correct.
Just German only?
This feels like a very small amount of time that might be difficult to fill.
Yep.
In the event that .2 doesn't work out, is there another option being considered, or?
We've talked about having an aide in the classroom with those 33 students. Obviously, that's not ideal, but that is an option that we can pursue if we can't find somebody to fill that position.
A Spanish-speaking aide?
We probably don't even have that, so unfortunately, it would just be somebody else in the classroom to help with the student management.
But certainly we could give preference to applicants that are bilingual here in Spanish.
Is that legal to have an aide in charge of the class?
They would be in charge of the class.
No,
We would
they'd be
maintain
helper.
a very large class size with an aide.
Yeah.
That would help with a larger class.
So at .2, how would that figure out in a day? Is that 1 class a day, or what is that?
So our related arts for 7th grade is 2 45-minute sections. So about 90 minutes per day. Yeah.
So you mentioned that Paula was not interested in doing .2, that wouldn't work?
When we broke down her pay, that was where she was very interested in doing she was interested in the time frame. She was not interested in a whole year at making a very small amount of money for the whole year. If that makes sense? Like she wants to come in and help and she wants to teach, but when you look at her being a part of our building for an entire school year and only making $10,000, that did not sit well with her.
I think we should maybe bring together an administrative recommendation for the personnel side of it and just focus on the FTE needs at this point, if that's agreeable to the board.
So in other words, the motion would be for a .2 person, but who and how and that would work out would be left up. Do we have a motion? Yeah, you already have a motion.
Okay, there was a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
The next item is a memorandum from Don Smith, Board Policy 538. Evaluation of professional staff has been updated to be consistent not only with statutory requirements, but also with our current language in the employee and teacher handbook. So we are submitting revised Policy 538.
Make a motion we approve policy number 538 as presented.
Second, and then I have questions.
Motion and second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, please. The first bullet point in the new language talks about a new to the system employee evaluation period, and at least 4 times during the first year and the same thereafter until the employee is considered an effective member of the staff. And so what happens if it's determined that the employee is not an effective member? Should there be an or added to that sentence? So until the employee is considered an effective member of the staff, or?
Well, I think with any evaluation system, the hope would be that you'd be able to bring them up to par,
Yes.
and you would continue the evaluations, and there's supports that would go along place with that if they're not considered an effective member by our evaluation tool, which may include then putting them on a performance improvement plan or providing them, essentially with different supports.
Mm-hmm.
And if at the end of the day, the evaluations conclude that the person isn't an effective member of our community from a teaching standpoint, then we would look to non-renew that individual or part ways with that individual.
And that makes sense to me. It's just the way this language is written. It sounds like you just keep doing it until that person's
Until
considered.
necessary, until why, yeah. I mean, the idea would be, instead of saying, we're going to, because a new employee could be somebody who's been teaching, like this year at the high school, for example, we've hired several new teachers, and some of them are listed today, who's been out teaching for several years already, who are experienced teachers. And one of our new teachers will be new to the profession, or only been teaching for the last 6 months teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so previous practice was that anybody new to the district would be on a 2 to 3 year evaluation process. So for the first 2 or 3 years, they may be receiving the same formative evaluation. And what this policy, what this first bullet is suggesting, is that we could look at those people as individuals. And so there wouldn't be that hard deadline of saying, yes, you will be on this formal evaluation cycle, receiving those number of check-ins for the first 2 years or for the first 3 years. We're saying everybody's going to be treated the same for the first year. Then after that, the level of supports or evaluations will be determined at the conclusion of that first year.
That makes sense to me. It was just this makes it sound like that thereafter, until the employee is considered an effective member, they'll be evaluated. And it doesn't really take into consideration not becoming effective.
Because we hope we hired the best, and we hope we can support them.
Oh, I understand that.
Right.
I think if you go down to the third bullet point, it probably gets a little bit closer to some of the wording that you might be considering. However, it does not give a very definitive. If someone is not performing, they will be subject to preliminary notice of non-renewal.
Yeah.
Or other encouragement to pursue other activities.
In the same paragraph, being a former teacher, I understand we're talking about the evaluate at least 4 times, 3 informal and 1 formal evaluation. I understand formal evaluation, usually they're announced, and I know the supervisors coming in. And could you just clarify how these 3 informal evaluations would occur?
That could be a combination of full observations, or like a walkthrough as well, or a combination of either or. Again, it's about that level of support. So You know, if you do a sit down and you 15-minute in the classroom and you observe something that isn't quite right, or you need some more information, then you obviously you have that conversation as a follow-up with the teacher over what was observed, and ask those questions then based off those conversations, what is next needed. I mean, maybe then at that point in time, is it a formal observation, whereas you said there's a little bit more of a pre-conference that goes along with it, some more documentation that goes along with it on the front end than the actual observation, and then again, a little more documentation on the end. And let's say things are still not successful at that point in time, well then do you need to do another formal observation, or do you need to do another announced observation, or maybe it's an unannounced observation that again goes more into the full period observation versus I guess more of an informal might be considered more of that walkthrough type. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So I mean, it's really again about how we provide support to our staff who aren't reaching those levels of expectations that we've established. And part of that, the transition to the strong model this year into the My Learning platform, I think it'll be a little bit clearer for staff as well. And there's some different dashboards that will help the administrator and that staff member know exactly where they're at in that process as well. And you can always do more observations.
Right.
You know, we want to make sure we at least have minimal standards put in place.
And I think it obviously goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that it's not just observations on an informal or formal basis of areas in which someone might be able to improve their performance, but also to provide feedback when that performance is solid. And that, quite honestly, and I know people hate hearing me say in various business environments, because that's saying maybe this isn't a business environment, but that should be an ongoing process. It may not be daily, but it's certainly more frequently than quarterly. Nothing should be a surprise when you get to a formal evaluation.
I don't believe we have a motion.
We have a motion and a
Okay.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Other discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Item 4.
So I wanted to bring this item back to the board, professional educator compensation for 2019-20. As you may recall, this past year with the creation of the biennial budget and the changes to teacher licensure that were inserted into that budget, it gave cause for the administration to consider an alternative compensation plan. So back in October of last year, we began those conversations, and the process involved myself and Mr. Hayek traveling around the district communicating an option to all of our teaching staff. That process came to a conclusion, if you will, around the end of April, with the decision to continue with our current salary schedule or matrix, if you will, albeit with some modifications that were perhaps a hybrid between the two. At that time, at our last regularly scheduled board meeting, there was some discussion among the board to want to consider perhaps an alternative compensation plan. While that conversation is still fresh in your minds, I wanted to present you, if you are so inclined, with the opportunity to provide direction to the administration as to what you would like to see in the future in terms of professional educator compensation. So essentially, I'm looking for some direct direction from the board moving forward.
I know during our discussions, I was very interested in our asking administration to continue to work on a model, a new compensation model. In the direction that we were working toward earlier in the year. Does that make sense? I'm interested to know a little bit more about if we adopted a model like that, how we'd be doing things like, how we'd be tracking how well the model was working in terms of the priorities that we'd established. A major one of which would be to promote engagement in effective professional development of our teaching staff. So that would be a very important issue from the monitoring perspective. But I would like us to continue exploration of a different compensation model.
Other comments?
I would just submit for clarification, are there aspects of a model that you do or do not want?
Before we get into a specific like that, can we see if there are other general questions?
Certainly.
Or comments?
I do have one. On your letter, the second paragraph, and there's two statements in there that may be a little bit contradictory. The first statement, beginning with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would suggest, places the focus of a new compensation plan appropriately on student achievement. This debate has been in education for a long time on salary schedules. And they've talked about trying to tie it to student achievement, which is a very, it's difficult, especially in certain areas. If you take a teacher like a math teacher, it's pretty easy because they have standardized tests and you can track these students, you can track the progress from the beginning of the year to the end of the year with a particular group of students to see, like we were talking about previous in the meeting, how far did they progress? How much did they move the needle in that year? But when you have a class that doesn't have standardized tests, like the classes I taught in computer science, there's no standardized test to show how I moved the needle. I mean, I know personally how I move the needle, but I don't think there is a tool out there that can effectively measure in my area how much they move the needle. Or if you have special education class like Mary Jo Barton's, I think it's very difficult to measure the student achiever or that needle. It's more of a subjective than an objective type of measurement. So we got to be very careful if we're going to tie this to student achievement across the board, 5 classes in the manner. In the last sentence, the model plan presented in the 2017-18 school year promoted salary increase for professional educators based on self-driven model of professional education development programs, like the summer institutes. And so I think the assumption is that if the teachers participate in these summer institutes, these are the skills we want our teachers to have, and we teach them and we train them and we make them better teachers. I can see that as a measuring stick to move the teachers over on the salary schedule. If they participate and they learn these new skills, because we believe, the administration believes this is what's going to move education in the positive direction, I think that's an easier, more objective and predictable model. I'm just a little bit hesitant on the student academic achievement. It's a very sticky topic, but I'm all for if the model, if the administration says all the teachers need to know this, and the teachers participate in that voluntarily in the summer, I can see that would be totally acceptable because they're putting their faith that you're teaching them the right things in the summer to move the needle. So I think we've got to be very careful on how we develop this. And also, like all jobs, there's some value to be said in years of experience. I mean, I know my first 3 years as a teacher, I wasn't very effective at all. And just through experience, I got to be a better teacher. I mean, that part comes into it, should play into it to a degree. I think that's why we have the matrix where we're going down. Now, I know what we did in this last contract is we compressed the matrix a little bit and put less emphasis on year of experience and more emphasis on the education or professional development. I could see that. I could see less on year of experience, so there's this guaranteed raise that's in there no matter what, and to shift more emphasis over to this professional development, because I believe that that's really the way. I mean, I really wish as a young teacher I would have had these professional development opportunities to become a better teacher, but I just didn't. I mean, we had to take whatever we could to move over on that salary schedule. Some of that pertained to my job, some of it absolutely didn't, because that's the only course that I could find, you know. So I would just like to make sure that it's tied to these summer institutes and professional development opportunities. And something still to be said for years of experience, but maybe not so heavily. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it.
And actually, that relates a lot to the comment I was making about how are we going to monitor that this is successful? And that does have to do with student achievement. Now, looking back at the evaluation policy that we just approved, the WSB had other examples, one of which very specifically said, we're going to look at test scores. Ours doesn't do that, but because, as I'm sure part of that is because, as you point out, not every discipline is going to be effectively monitored by state test scores. But
if I might recommend, I think the board has discussed during the recent evaluations of the salary schedule and any adjustments there too, that we would like to see a different model of some sort, or at least consideration that we might be able to give to a different type of approach in compensation. I think it would be difficult to say specifically what that looks like in the time frame we have allotted today. If the board would be open to it, I would like to suggest either some sort of a blocked time workshop, if you will, to explore this a little bit further, to include some of the data that was presented to us during the year last year, and any potential tweaks that the administration might have to that from when it was presented back in, October, whenever that was. So that we can really devote a reasonable amount of time. What I don't want to necessarily do is say, yes, go ahead to the administration and have them put a lot of work on it, and it does not include some of the concerns that we would have as to how do we measure the success of the compensation plan, not necessarily the teachers, but the revised plan emphasizing professional development, et cetera. So I would like to offer that to the board as a potential direction to go, rather than giving a specific charge at this time to the administration on moving forward with something that we don't have our hands around as to what we might like to see.
that's a great idea.
I agree.
Okay. With that, we will charge the administration with, or I guess it would be Carol, with finding a time that we could get together to have a discussion specifically on this subject. Okay.
Some of the data that would be useful, and maybe this is what you were referring to, Steve, is the that mega study where they looked at the various factors. That I think if we can align ourselves with that, then we can align compensation with achievement without having to tie it directly to test scores.
Okay. Having dispensed with that, at least for the moment.
The final item under administrator are food service meal price adjustments for the upcoming year. And I would defer any questions to Mr. Hayek. Looking at a 5-cent increase for the 18-19 meal prices.
My only question on this, as I looked through it, was how much of this is based upon, is this based upon the contract that we have with Chartwell? That
Not at all.
Not at all. So how do we arrive at the...
It's totally driven by DPI.
DPI. It's their evaluation tool. So regardless if you're with Cartwells or by yourself, it would be on. I get it. Okay. Does DPI, just curiosity, does DPI make that sort of information known to everybody in the state, or did they tailor make it for Wapaka?
Oh, no, this is universal. Every district is doing
This was at one point considered for the consent agenda because really we have no say in it other than to say yes or no, or unless we are going to choose to more specifically subsidize as a district, which we are not in a financial position to do. So, but we have nonetheless not addressed it on a consent agenda basis in the past. That's certainly something that we could consider in the future.
No, I'm just curious as to who the driving force behind it. I didn't realize it was DPI. So I'll make a motion that we accept the new changes in the school lunch program.
Motion and second to approve the pricing as presented. Any further discussion? Pretty much limits the discussion when they say the DPI gives you a set formula that everybody has to follow, doesn't it? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Brings us to the consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Pat Fair?
Aye.
Steve Hackett?
Aye.
Mark Goldston?
Aye.
Sandra Robinson?
Yes.
Betty Mannion?
Yes.
Dimitri Martin?
Aye.
Steve Johnson?
Yes. Okay. With that, we will move to, I will entertain a motion.
I would move that we adjourn into closed session in accordance with Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically to discuss a teacher licensure matter and the district administrator's annual evaluation.
There's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn into closed session in accordance with the Wisconsin statute 1985, parent 1, parent C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Roll call.
Steve Hackett?
Aye.
Pat Fair?
Aye.
Sandy Robinson?
Yes.
Mark Goldston?
Aye.
Dimitri Martin?
Aye.
Betty Mannion?
Yes.
Steve Johnson?
Yes. We'll take just a moment for the videographer to figure out how he's going to make us look better.